Yo, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another game. We're here. We're about to get some work done on Cellbound, my mapcraft submission, and yeah, I'm looking forward to. Just making more content in general. I've been feeling for a long time that we're a little far away from having the content pool that we ought to have, but I am what they maybe ought to be. But I do feel like, in general, it's an improvement, and I'm not going to say that's enough long term, but it's something, and I would rather have something going on than absolutely nothing. So, making do with what we got is the name of the game here. So, most of the Art Pass stuff that I intend to include here is going to be stuff like some texture changes. I'm just doing that so I don't disturb the actual blends that I've put together. Although in this case, I don't think it actually results in anything bad. But sometimes the changes ended up being pretty destructive. That's the unfortunate part of like not being able to lock terrain, basically. Like I can't just select terrain and lock it or whatever. I'm not really sure why though. Like maybe, I mean, it is a new feature and you don't get those too often in any software. That's why I was blown away when I saw there was an update to Groupie, for example. All right, let's pull this one over here because we need something different than that. Okay. I also really wish that whatever he was using to display creep wasn't so fucked. I guess we'll just hide creep for now. So another thing that I would like to do in this case is put together the crevices, because we're going to need those. So I'll place those here. Like, we don't really need them necessarily, but I just feel like it would be an appropriate... I'm wondering why these are, like, in different orders. I think maybe I flubbed something over there. Yeah, I did. I must have, like, copied and pasted them in the wrong order when I was first setting them up. That's very strange. That's okay, though. I can fix that pretty easily. So this will obviously have a bit of a change or an impact on the way that the AI lays their base out. And I guess technically it'll also change how a player can lay their base out. But I think that's fine. So this is kind of like doodadding in my mind, where we're just putting this stuff together and trying our best to make it fit. Thankfully, with the dirt subtile, we can actually we have just a lot more creativity in general with how we incorporate some of these tiles because we don't have to adhere to the same like subtile pattern. Oh, I do have. I forgot to mention this earlier. I do have a bit of a. It's not really as much of an announcement as it is a teaser, but the Mapping Starter Guide Part 2 is processing on YouTube as we speak. Probably going to take a little bit since it's a pretty big video. It actually ended up being longer than the first video, but not to the point where it's like. I actually don't think it's bad because it's just a bigger map. So even though I cut a lot of stuff out in terms of like stuff that I didn't think would be particularly helpful for the average Joe, it still wound up being. I think it wound up being pretty impactful overall. So. I've realized, perhaps too late, that I need to leave this area open for creep to spread if that I want them to have a chance at placing spore colonies over there. But I actually think that that's like a half measure anyway. I don't think it's actually possible to do that in an intelligent way. Oh, that's not the tile I wanted. All right. I think instead we'll just have spores up against here or whatever. I actually don't know how I'll do more customized build orders and stuff like that. I think so in the AI script, the way that static defense are even handled is in this case we just check to see how many sunken colonies we have, and if it's like below a certain amount, we do the add build. And then, well, this is obviously like add sunken itself has the conditionals, right? So add sunken will call add sunken check if they have enough resources for a sunken colony and a creep colony combined. I didn't factor in the cost of the drill out here. Maybe I should. But in any case, this is essentially how it's put together. And obviously it also waits until they have production. I should probably remove larva colony from this example because if you don't have a main structure in this case, maybe instead of bring, it should actually be like local 255 EX0. Maybe it should be that. Because this stuff does get multi-threaded on a per town basis anyway, like per expansion or whatever. So I actually think this would be better. And so here you can see I'm checking for a certain amount of breakpoints of sunken colonies. So at 5, we go to add sunken check 2. And at 10, we just return and we don't do anything. Also, notably, we only progress past add sunken check 2 if we're currently under attack. So that's like one case where it's a little bit more complex. Also, it will, in this case, never add a spore colony without having a sunken colony, which I don't actually know if I like. That was originally there because the AI would sometimes build the spore colony or spore colonies before the sunken colony. But in certain cases, it actually makes sense to build only spores. So what I was going to do is refactor this entirely to be based around, like, am I under attack by an air unit? If so, build anti-air, or escalate the priority of anti-air or something like that. And I think I could do that by having a conditional that's like, checking for action in the last minute or whatever. It sets a variable and then clears it after a minute of like rechecks it every 10 seconds and clears it after a minute of like after a minute it just goes away basically. So I think that would probably be fine. I could come up with some system like that, and that would just decide like, all right, I'm under attack by either ground forces or air forces. There'd be a variable for both. So you'd have a variable like under attack ground. So I guess the comparison here would be like, it makes sense to preemptively build a small number, which is what I've done here. But then in this case, instead of jumping if I'm under attack, it would be like var ex jump, and then the var would be like under attack by ground. And then if it's 0, which means it's false, we would jump to blank return, and then 13. And in this case, we could do the same thing, but it would be by air. And if either one, and again, I'll do the variable calculations later. But in this case, I don't think we even need to have a max. Because this block will, I mean, I'm trying to imagine like, I think this is a bit of a digression, but I think add return has, oh, okay, so we can do like add return, wait, 960, and then I'll go back to add sunk. So get rid of that. And then where's add spore? Because it does the same thing. Okay, so now we can go to this. And basically it will, let's see. Does this make sense logically? I think so. So we have add sunk, which will wait for the can static build variable to work or to be set to true. Oh, interestingly enough, the spore colony doesn't have that same check, which is kind of funny. So that's a bug. I guess that explains why sometimes we would still see spores, although we wouldn't see them, but like they would get queued up a little bit. They would pass this check sooner. So sometimes you would see like spores queued up faster or something after the first sunken. Maybe that, I guess that's probably why this first sunken check was even necessary. It's kind of stupid. So we don't need this anymore. That sunken colony safeguard. And I think we should probably wait. We should limit the lower limit of spore colony should be 3. So it's like I'm only going to progress. I'm only going to bother making more spore colonies than 3 if I'm actually under attack by air units, basically. And then like, I guess the other thing here is we should have a duplicate of this block, which is like 480, or yeah, that would be half of 960. So in this case, it would be var ex jump under attack by air 1. And if that's the case, then wait for half as long before redoing the spore colony check. This way we don't create a bunch of blocks or whatever. And in this case, we would also call this block in the escalated one. So, and here we do that. And so we can 480. There's probably a more elegant way to do that, but whatever. So yeah, I like that system in general. We still have to actually calculate under attack by air and under attack by ground, which we can do in var ex Have our set under attack. So here we do our EX weight under attack 113 is fine. And then so again, we're waiting for 10 seconds and then going to under attack by air calc. So I think in this case, we would do something like something like this. I can always iterate on the system later on, but I'm thinking like var. So we do player combat 17, 13, 63, false, jump. And this is where we would actually go into the anti-grief air thing. So this is literally every area in the game, in case you're wondering. And then in this case, we would jump to Finn. And then here we would do var set under attack by air. Oh, this is for air, I guess, ground. We'll obviously have to make a separate list of all ground units in the game, which is going to be a bit annoying. Air combat 17, 13, 63, false, jump. And 13. And then obviously we can clear both under attack by ground and under attack by air in under attack 0, under attack by ground 0, 13, under attack by air 0, 13. Set under attack by air 113. Okay. So this obviously, I think this makes perfect sense. So I guess we should do at L, because under attack sometimes is set to, oh, it's not set to 2 here, but it would be in other cases. So now we just need to make a list of all ground units. So obviously there's Mason, Maverick, Harakan, Cyprian, Vulture. Well, I guess I'll just go down the list here, actually. Say Eidolon. Savant. Madcap, Heracles, Apostle, Autocrat, Olympian. Vulture, Cyclops, Goliath, Phalanx, Siege Mode. Southpaw, Paladin, Madrigal, Pazuzu, Penumbra, and then Blackjack cohort. Aspirant. Claymore Siren. And then we have Striga Tarask Anticathon. And that's just one race. Although the shared units probably could go in another category, but whatever. This is Scribe, Zealot, Tracadon, Ecclesiast, Legionnaire, Hierophant, Amaranth, Atreus, Archon, Augur, Simulacrum, Manifold, Golem, Idol, or Architect, Pariah. Oh no, it's Demiurge. I already did Aspirant. We've got Kabbalist, Charlatan, Excetralisk. Empress is not an air unit. Okay, Pariah. All right. I think I got them all. Droleth, Zethrakor, Clausilisk, Orvrakor, Lyrilisk, Hydralisk, Bactylisk, Scathalor, Zordisthaleth, Lycizilisk, Convalisk, Rillarocor, Ultracore. I think that's it. Okay. Well, that's one hell of a list. But okay. We know for sure. That's taken care of. I did want to confirm that I had Luminary and Empress in this list. Empress is not in this list, so we have to add that to the one down here. I think this logic actually should be fine. And obviously it's copy-pastable into the other functionalities. Just add Empress to this list. Luminary's right there. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what all that's going to accomplish, but theoretically, we will at least handle that a bit better. Now, the one problem is if I wanted base layouts, if I wanted customized positions for building morphs, we haven't actually got that functionality down yet. So, for example, I can set creep colony requests to be in certain positions, but it's up to the AI in whatever order they want to fulfill it in to place them in areas that make sense. So yeah, I might have like the highest priority creep colony because I usually believe in the build orders that the first creep colony is almost always turned into a larval colony. So in that case, I could throw down a creep colony base layout and say this is the highest priority one, so this is the one that they're going to get first and satisfy first. And as a result, that one will be a larval colony. And then I guess I can like, based on, since it'll be a consistent build order, and theoretically I could even like customize the priority or whatever. I could probably say something like, all right, I know that like the next two are going to be Sunkens, and then there'll be a Spore. So I could theoretically do that, but the problem is like, is there really much of a reason to do that? I'm not sure that there is. So I guess moral of the story. Um, I don't really know what the moral of the story is. Moral of the story is you gotta, if you're gonna be doing layouts for this sort of thing, you probably just want the AI. You want the layouts to be general enough that either a sunken or a spore could make sense there, and that's really difficult to do. So yeah, that'll be a trip. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming of me placing doodads. There's like an ancient fucking inside joke between Kian and myself as we're the last survivors of the era of where this joke came from. But I used to just flat out like I used to just have a ridiculous habit for placing a million doodads in a map and being very excessive. Practice that was probably noticed by a lot of people in the good old inconsummate days. But either way, it originated from a long time ago, and it's just funny to me to reminisce back to those days. Oh, I'm in the fog of war layer, I guess. I was wondering why there was like a weird, this like hatch mark shit. Yeah. Is there anyone I haven't used in this area? Did I use them all? Oh, there we go. The Lost Blend. Okay. Now, surely this is like my playground over here, dude. I do like these really wacky mineral field layouts. I know some people are not very happy with them, but to me, these are like epic. Mm. There we go. Big smooches. Oh! I muted myself to deal with fucking motorcycles and forgot to unmute. I was just commenting on the fact that we don't have that many more bases left, but even so, I'm gonna want to get some work done on the script pretty soon. It'll be a good idea to just get that over, or get that started anyway. See how many dialogue lines I can get in before tomorrow, and then obviously I have to do the voice acting. I probably won't be able to do that until tomorrow morning. But it wouldn't be map crap without some haha, so... That's why it was kind of ambitious of me to decide, fuck it, I'll do a serious project. Or serious map, because, like, I don't know how serious I can encourage people to take my work with such little limited time. But... That's always a struggle anyway. Normally I like to position my screen a little bit closer to the left over here so that I don't have to crane my neck as much. But such is life when it's up against the map edge. Welcome. I feel like it's not really sad. Just it's kind of an obvious statement, I suppose. But you really know I'm not an artist when, like, my fucking claim to fame, my major accomplishment, artistically speaking, was getting these mineral chunks kit-bashed into the crevices. Like, it's not some, like, custom model or epic, like, 2D artwork or whatever. It's just, you really kit-bashed that shit real good, Pranoga. Damn right I did. And nothing else. But I'll take it, man. Still, it came out okay. I'm not bad mouthing my own work. I'm just saying, you can really tell where my specialties are when that's what ends up happening. Okay. All right, final one. These actually have been going pretty quickly since I threw them into the brush. I used to take a lot longer. And I was kind of, for whatever reason, I was dubious as to whether or not them being a part of the brush would actually simplify my workflow or make it easier or whatever. Because I was thinking, well, there's a lot of, like, manual work that I do to, you know, combine these or to realign these or whatever. Like, yeah, but it's also just faster always. So I feel a little silly for not having made this conversion sooner, but it is what it is. All right. think that'll do it for our decoration pass. It's not much. It really is only just a couple of different texture tiles and getting the crevices down. But we can always come back to the decor a little bit later. I mean, I obviously want to add a couple of flourishes of like stacked dirt when we have the dirt suite, for example. If I wanted to like support this map or whatever with those changes later. Okay. Okay. This actually reminds me. So, how did I do this before? Oh, I see what happened here. Okay. I found another thing to... I don't know about if it's a procrastination technique, but I'm getting sidetracked on this shit anyway. Just add this here. Add cannon. Okay. Ugh. So I'm thinking we probably want and photon cannon check. So I think we did have the check 2, and the check 2 is like this. Or if it's not under attack. But for Protoss, it doesn't matter. We'll just do under attack. And then var ex jump under attack 1. 15. 16. I don't think I need to mess around with the shield battery stuff, to be honest. Besides maybe reducing the number of per town, because it's not necessarily that impactful. Okay. Now, we've done this for these guys, and we're just checking under attack. And then... Oh yeah, and then I guess we should also have no town's pylon. Now, this is much the same way, I think, where we'll do... And this is obviously super easy to resolve here, where we do add watchdog. We don't need a 3. That's a quote. You can quote me on that. Boost the base number. And then this is go to add return weight 960, except if under attack by air, return weight 480. Oh, I guess that is kind of an oversight, isn't it? Instead of going blank return here, we should actually be waiting the full cycle. Oh no, we shouldn't. We should be rechecking it as often as possible, right? Because, well, maybe not if you're not under... I think if you're not under attack, it shouldn't be checking. It's sunk. It would only be if you're... Yeah, okay. I think that's fine. What else? Ah, yes, the classic ion cannon blocks. We'll do the same thing. So if we are not under attack, then definitely wait 960. And then, yeah, we're doing go to there. I guess we'll just have an extra 960 in here. Okay. Although I was thinking maybe we would do the 480 if it returns without getting any requests, because the point of having the 480 there, or the 960 there, the wait at all, so you don't like spam the request or whatever. But if you're not getting any requests, it's probably fine to give it like a half wait, cut the wait in half, because there's nothing going on. And then there's the bunker stuff, which... Yeah, bunkers are a little bit different, because obviously, like, AI doesn't really use them very well, so I guess I'll just leave that for now. There's not really much of a point. This should be like barracks, captaincy, factory, iron foundry, starport, nanite assembly, scrapyard, because any unit can enter it now, so that's fine. Okay. All right. So that's a nice fix up for the script. Now, let's get into a different kind of script, in my opinion. So how's your shipping going anyway, DF, out of curiosity? Assuming you're still hanging. Oh, and I didn't look at this guy's new ramp that he wanted to show me. Or show us. Yeah, it does fit a little bit. It's still a little bit too bright, but it's definitely better. What's up, James? I think you asked me this exact question like months ago, and my answer was something to the effect of like trying to basically I would try to convince them to give me the source code, but I don't even know what the fuck I would. I don't know. It was the engine was mostly made by one guy, so I would probably just encourage him to release the source code somewhere. That's what I would try to get him to do. I guess my answer didn't change as a result. If you're trying to ask me something else that I would say, like, I don't know, besides the source code stuff, I would just say prioritize like modding support or engine features, like the AI editor that didn't get into the map editor. If we could have convinced them to have put more effort into the feature set, that would have been nice. Just so that we would have had more tools to play with. Even if we didn't get the source code, at least we would have gotten something that improved our ability to actually enact change. So. Just checking to see if my video's done processing, but it probably ain't. How unfortunate. All right. Okay, so we were about to sit down and do some script writing for Cellbound. And I'm thinking, because we want our primary... So our two characters that we're going to be showing off here, Karaxar and Ithintos, are... Like, Karaxar is not exactly young, but I had the vision in my head that he wouldn't be fully proven yet. There would be no reason to doubt him, and that's why he's sent on this mission to begin with. So I kind of want to like emphasize that, because when you think about this situation logically, so Karaxar served under Tarim, and Tarim is now wanted, and up until this point, Karaxar has, aside from serving under Tarim, which might draw some suspicion, he's not actually done anything to irk anybody in the primacy. So they sent him on this mission because they trust him, and this is almost seen as like a test. And at the same time, it might even be born out of necessity. Like maybe ideally they would have found somebody who didn't have like biases or potential like past conflicts of interest or whatever you want to call it between the primacy and this guy that they're trying to, you know, return to jail, basically. He's a fugitive, and they're trying to bring him to justice. So normally they might have sent somebody else, but Karaxar happened to be at the right place at the right time. Maybe his knowledge of Tarim's like battle strategy would even come in handy. So there might even be like a pro, like there's a list of pros and cons to sending him here, and they've weighed it up, and for whatever reason, maybe some of them external, maybe some of them internal, they decided, fuck it, this guy needs to be the one who we send. So we'll send Ithintos, who's like a strategist and a like an advisor and aide, and he'll make sure that the mission is completed, or like if some issue happens, then obviously he'll be able to report to us and tell us what happened. So I think Karaxar and Ithintos will be on mostly friendly terms. Like Ithintos will technically be like the senior, but not in terms of rank, just in terms of age and experience. But it's a completely different like ranking. or kind of role, we'll say. Not a battle leader as much as he is just like an aide and assistant and adjutant to battle leaders, you could imagine. So there will be mutual respect between the two of them. And Athentos will be like aware of the potential conflict of interest of Kiraxar being sent to like return his mentor and former commander uh, to to jail, basically. So to the custody of the primacy. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting premise, but I wanted to make sure that I found a reason where maybe I don't even need to impart any of this or all of this information to the player in the briefing or anywhere else, but it's going to fuel the character's decisions, but like bubbling beneath the surface, right? It's the motivation that they have, and if the player finds that out through dialogue or through intuition or maybe through some sort of ideally well-paced exposition, if I decide to bother with that, then that's great. But they don't actually need to know the motivation of these characters explicitly. They don't need to know every single element that feeds into it. I need to know that because I'm writing them, and I need to make sure that their shit makes sense and their actions make sense, and that everything checks out with their motivation, so that they can be consistent characters. The Terrans who are worshiping the Zerg are the Nidus Trinity, and one of their subsections, the Eviz sect, are operating in this area, and they're the ones who are down here in the bottom left of the map. So I figure based on the reconnaissance that Athentos and the other forces of the Alasara jury are able to put together, they should know that there are Terrans involved, but maybe they don't immediately know like what their motivation is. There is an opportunity for me in this briefing, depending on how long I wanted to make it, to have like a closing to the briefing where the Terran commander is hailed, and we actually get to speak to Joran Simons. And we reveal the Nidus Trinity. We reveal who they are. And this would be an opportunity to... It would actually be a nice opportunity the more I'm thinking about it. So Kiraxar, while not necessarily like the brainiac behind every... like he's not a master strategist, but he'll obviously recognize that in this case, there's Terim and Terim's pet Zerg brood, or whatever you want to call this, right? He's managed to bend some Zerg to his will somehow. Obviously, the odds of you winning a 1 versus 2 in that situation, pretty slim. And so Kiraxar will recognize this and maybe even seek to, like, there'll be like a brief discussion or disclaimer that, like, obviously the primacy doesn't condone consorting with Terrans, but in such a case, you know, like maybe he'll reference some past event where there's like a precedent for it, set for it, basically. It's like, I'm not sure how formal I'll make with it, but I can imagine him saying, like, I'm invoking I'm invoking the, you know, law of whatever. And it'll be like an obvious reference to some previous precedent where there was a battle that happened, and in order to attain victory, an alliance of convenience was formed with another race. And so I think that'll be fine. We'll see where it goes. I don't restrict tech based on sub-factions, but the AI personalities that these factions are made of will only use certain tech. So when you're up against the Nidus Trinity, you're going to see a lot of cohorts, which are like infested Terrans, basically. In the lore, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's basically what they are. They're just like, they're specialized infantry that receive extra healing, so they can be kept on the front lines a lot longer. So they have like innate synergy with healing units and stuff. And that's one thing you'll see. You'll generally see like a couple of other, essentially, units that have been reverse engineered through Zerg experimentation, basically. So you will see some faction-specific tendencies and strategies, and the personality that you're fighting against, like the basically the play style is different, but based on the faction, and the units used is different based on the faction. It's not technically disabled, like none of the other stuff is technically disabled, but the AI just doesn't make use of them. And for the player, I don't want to just remove technology, because I mean, I'm actually I haven't figured this one out yet. This is still kind of an open question, but there are so many units in Cosmonarchy that removing a subset for lore reasons wouldn't actually remove the potential for certain playstyles to be expressed. It does restrict you, but the impact is much less than if you remove like I think in Brood War there's only like 12 units you have in the entire race in terms of combat units. So removing removing 2 units from that list, or 4 units from that list, like in the campaigns, they just like randomly disable air units, for example, that has far-reaching implications, and we just don't have the same impact. Like you could disable an entire branch of like 7 or 8 or more, like maybe double-digit units for a race, and you would still have like a ton of different options in this game state. So it does have less impact to just flat out disable tech. I still avoid it mostly on principle, but it is an open question as to like whether or not it should be regarded as with as much contempt as it was previously. And there's when you break it down, there's not really a functional difference between saying you've disabled technology for one subfaction and saying you've added a new unit for just this subfaction that only this subfaction has access to. Like, so if I were to conceptualize the cohort that I described earlier as a Nidus Trinity specific unit and disable it for every other subfaction, then that's not really functionally different than me adding a unique unit to the Nidus Trinity and saying only the Nidus Trinity can build this unit. The reason why it's different is like the one reason where it is different is theoretically you can build all this shit in melee. There's no campaign, specific units. It's all available in melee. So that's where it's different. That's where I think there's like a meaningful digression, but it's I think it's mostly about like you want to make sure that you're facilitating multiple playstyles. That's the most important part. So if a playstyle requires, like, say, a specific number of units or a specific set of units, and you disable them, then you are removing the potential for one playstyle to even be accessed. So yeah, it's just not something I've thought too heavily about. It's definitely something I need to start thinking about, because one of the campaigns that I have planned involves a faction that essentially gets dominated by a demiurge, which is a robot, a Protoss robot that can mind control units when it brings them below a certain HP threshold. And it's a unit you can just build normally, but if it's also supposed to be, like, if there's supposed to be a character that's a demiurge that literally takes command of your entire faction, like, well, that doesn't really, like, does it make sense then that you're able to build your own demiurges from the first mission? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but at that point you're starting to battle the lore against the mechanics of the game, or against gameplay. Like, the story and the gameplay are not congruent in this example, and that's obviously something where I'm always going to err on the side of gameplay. I'm always going to try to side with gameplay over story, because I believe that the gameplay is paramount and it's the most important. So making sure things are consistent there is my top priority always. And balancing isn't really that difficult, because I'm targeting like team games, 2v2s, 3v3s. You're always going to have different units. You're always going to have like wildly different compositions. So just because you have like hundreds of units per race doesn't mean that it's difficult to balance them. There's going to be some edge cases where you're going to want to consider redesigning a unit or tweaking its stats or something. the most glaring balance issues are always the most obvious ones. It's like, oh, this unit can like, take too much damage before dying or deals too much damage or whatever. Basically, in my opinion, anytime the solution to a unit coming onto the field is denying it from being able to appear is kind of indicative of that. And it was kind of like that in vanilla and Brood War when you would have like, oh, the Protoss gets 12 carriers and wins the game, even in like melee, even in like pro games, in Korean pro games. And the solution was just to stop the Protoss from attaining critical mass. That's a solution. Yes, that's a piece of counterplay. And technically that is always the case. Like if you don't deny your opponent the ability to mass up, 300 supply worth of units in Cosmonarchy or whatever, then yeah, you're going to be in for a rough time. But if you can't, if there's literally does not exist a solution to that is reasonable for you to implement, then that is going to be that's indicative to me of a balancing problem. Like if my opponent shows up with 12, they're called Solarians instead of carriers in Cosmonarchy. If he shows up with 12 Solarians, which by the way are more powerful in Cosmonarchy than they are in the default game, my solution is not, oh, I should rewind time and stop him from finishing up his 12th Solarian. The solution is, oh, I should get some of the units that can actually fight Solarians and win in battles against them. Or I should use some abilities that will allow me to that will help me in the battle here. Instead of just saying, oh, I lose because he did that and I didn't stop him. It's more like, how do I fight this army? And it's like not even possible to do that in default Brood War. Or maybe the Solarian case is a bad example because I can think of like Defense Matrix battle cruisers or something might be able to beat them, or maybe like obviously a nuke. But the odds of you being able to pull that off in a especially at a pro game at a high level, like odds are you're not going to be doing that. So it's an OP Demiurge. Yeah, the character is just a buffed Demiurge. Yeah, and that's the thing is like I don't fully know how that's going to go, but yeah, that's the tech tree diatribe there. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the case. Like, I mean, for one, it probably also would have been first person instead of third person. But I guess I could experiment with the third person mode. But yeah, I really like the like. So one thing that I've been doing lately is exploring some some roguelike games. Well, I guess not really that many now that I think about it. I've just been stuck on one of them right now where I've been playing it now and again called Synthetic with a K, not a C. And I haven't really dived into the content yet, but I really like playing a game where I can sink like 10 hours in and not actually have like I've seen maybe 10% of the different kinds of enemies that you can get to. And I don't know if this is the case with the Synthetic game. It's just an example. But I find it really lame when like I play an hour into the game and I've already seen most of the content. And I'm not talking about like bosses or whatever. But like the original Dead Space game had maybe double digit different enemy types. Again, not talking about bosses. And then from what I recall, the bosses were mostly just like damage sponges anyway, so or bullet sponges or whatever. It's like they weren't even really that interesting. I think there were some that were more set piece driven where it wasn't really about like damage, it was more like about like basically a quick time event, like pushing buttons at the right time. But the idea that I had for Dead Space when I was playing the second game more recently, I think last year sometime, I played that game and I thought like there's so many different like enemies you could make out of this. And then they had some enemies that like one of them only showed up once in the whole game, like that scientist that spawns these weird detachable like creatures or whatever that I think are also more QTEs, unfortunately. But yeah, like like different weapon types, different enemy types. It's like it's pretty nice to have different variations of stuff, and having so many different kinds. It's like maybe in the case where you're brand new to Cosmonarchy, you walk into this game and you play a mission or two, like it might take you 10 maps of like full gameplay to experience playing with or against all of the units in the game. And that might be like a half an hour to an hour each mission or something. And even then, it's a bit more replayable than most games because it's more about like there's a lot of map specific things you can do with composition specific things you can do. And having more like there's two different things you can basically do with content in a video game. One of them is just have a lot of tools, which would be like weapons, enemies, whatever, units in an RTS. And the other one is have a lot of content or have a lot of levels, I guess would be the best way because they're both content. And then the levels is like, different missions, campaigns, multiplayer, game modes, whatever. And then, so I guess environments would be a better way to describe it. It's like tools and environments. And I feel like having a lot of both is good, but most games don't have a lot of either. And if they have a lot of levels, if they have a lot of environments, usually there's a lot of repetition there where they don't have enough, like their tool set, their toolbox isn't big enough and expansive enough to support constant play on a number of different levels. But if you go deep on both of them, you can really unlock a lot of gameplay. You can really unlock a lot of enjoyment out of the experience. Yeah, exactly. I don't think I've actually played Perfect Dark, but yeah, the main idea of having like a lot of different tools, I think just works best because then even theoretically, if you are replaying like content, if you don't have that many levels, so it's one of the reasons why I worked so much on the mod itself of Cosmonarchy before really only now diving into making a lot of content for like the environment side is because when you have a really strong game state, when you have a really strong set of tools for the player to engage with, then any piece of content that you put out for an environment, new level, new game mode, whatever, that can be experienced so many different ways by even one player. One player can experience it so many different ways. Just by playing a different play style or maybe playing a different race if the level supports it or something like that. And it's like an exponential thing where because you have so many tools and you have such a robust tool set, your environment can be leveraged and experienced way differently and at a way deeper level than the average game. And even though it was maybe I should have made more levels and more missions sooner, it doesn't like I'm not unhappy about only now starting to work on levels and all that sort of thing, campaigns and map sets and stuff, because now we really have like a ridiculously robust toolkit that allows players and level designers to do a lot with it. So it's pretty nice. Pretty nice to have that up your sleeve. I think with 3D games in general, though, it's a lot harder to justify making a lot of tools if we're going to use that definition, like a lot of enemies or a lot of weapons, because you have to the art pipeline has to be really good to generate high quality, which most games don't have, assets for a lot of tools, for any tools, but like for a lot of them. If you're going to have a lot of enemy types, then you have to make art for all of those enemies. So yeah. Whereas I don't even really challenge that right now because I am using a bunch of placeholder assets that are just ripped from every which way. So, I mean, pretty uncountable. Especially when we move on to the new engine, when we rebuild this game in a new engine, which is coming later on this year, the toolkit will like the actual developer tools will be so much better that I'll be able to make a lot like more content faster without sacrificing quality while actually improving quality really because it's in a new engine, the limits are gone and stuff like that. Right now I've got a rough planning for 3 campaigns with 8 missions each, but I don't actually know if the mission count will remain the same between the campaigns. Some might be longer or shorter, and that's down to like more story iteration. And then beyond that, I know I'm going to have at least 3 more campaigns. I also am working on a birthday campaign where it's literally a campaign made up of birthday maps. And the first of which was UD Commanders, and that's already done. So technically, there's like 7 unique campaigns, and then there's a map set of just essentially one-off missions. It's like a map pack, you could think of it, where there's a bunch of single-player one-off maps that that are not connected from a story perspective, but they're connected as a group just because that's where anytime I have a new like one-off scenario, I'll put it in there, and that's called the Lost Gods. But the documentation for the first 3 campaigns I had planned is on this webpage here, which you can go to on the website. But I think the thing is, like, when we get to the new engine, I'm going to have like 15 plus individual races. So you think it's like tough enough to balance the game. I'm planning on having literally, what is that? 5 times the number of races as in the default game, because it's like 3 to 15. I'm looking at having like probably, yeah, I want to say it's like minimum 200 units, buildings included, per race. So, I mean, that's 3,000 units total if we just go off of that estimate. 3,000 different units. And again, buildings are included there, so it's a little bit bloated, but like the number of tools are going to be pretty fucking high. And then the environments are going to match that. So there'll be at least one, probably more than one campaign where you play as one of the races. And if there's going to be 15 fucking races, then there's probably going to be at least 15 campaigns. So eventually we'll get there. The promised land of a million, of endless content, basically. And all that stuff, like that's where I'm going to deviate the most from the status quo, is the payment model, the monetization, where you'll just buy the game and you'll get all current and future content. And that will always be the case. So it'll probably be like $20, maybe $30, but I don't know, $20 probably. Now, I think it's possible to have a ridiculous amount of content without sacrificing quality. In fact, I'm pretty sure that all of the content that people will experience within Cosmonarchy, at least the first-party content, as in stuff made by me, is going to be infinitely better and superior than any RTS campaigns that they've played elsewhere. Just because, can you name a good RTS campaign? I can't. And I've played, like, literally hundreds of RTS campaigns. So, I mean, that's pretty sad. So yeah, there's I don't even know if I can name an average RTS campaign. It's pretty bad, unfortunately. It's like they all have really glaring flaws. So just because it takes me like less than a week to make a mission like Cellbound, where again, this is partially because we have the developer tools to do this, but it'll be even faster theoretically for me to put together something even better than this in the future. And I'm not saying this mission is like the fucking best mission I've ever made, but it's a pretty good one, and it's also pretty novel. It's kind of experimental, so we'll get there. Well, action RPG might actually be appropriate for StarCraft 2, considering it's definitely not an RTS. At least in a campaign. I guess it's technically an RTS in multiplayer. Point and click adventure. I'm trying to not beat the player over the head with a bunch of like hmm. So I'm trying not to beat the player over the head with a bunch of like expository dialogue, but I also want to make I want to show, as opposed to tell, show the a little bit of the organizational structure from the well, at least of the primacy from this perspective. Try to think of a term that would describe literally just a starting base. I guess a colony is fine. I'm not really happy with this line of dialogue. I'll probably tinker with it later. I hope they're going to arrest Browder. But probably not. I don't know what I'll call the law of or whatever, or even if it'll be called law, but there'll be something that is implied that there might be an alliance that works, or alliance of sorts that could theoretically happen. I've never had music playing, dude. I mean, I had music playing years ago, but I can't remember the rules behind whether or not you capitalize a rank. I think you capitalized it when you were referring to a person, so it'd be like Commander Todd, but you wouldn't capitalize it just by saying, "Oh yeah, that's the commander." But I don't remember if it's like Commander of the Third Reich. I think I don't know why that was what came to mind. I think then you would capitalize it. I ain't no fucking linguist. I don't like asking Google questions. Pretty sure it just sells my questions to China or something. I kind of want to do a very minor bait and switch in this dialogue line where I have Joran talk about like higher creatures or something. I don't know if it would really be worth it, but I kind of like the idea of him implying like there's these beautiful, pristine, perfect creatures that we must recover. And like Kiraxar thinks he's talking about Protoss or something. But I don't think it's really possible to do that in the time span of just one line. And I do want to be cognizant of time. You know what I mean? So the summation that Kiraxar is going to make here is that logically, if the Nidus Trinity is attempting to recover the Zerg, and they threatened to kill off the entirety of the jury if they so much as set foot on the creep, then obviously I don't know if I'll call them sacred beasts or not, but basically, if that's what they're going to threaten the jury with, and they weren't even involved in this heist, then obviously they're going to be killing Tarim. So that's like a very obvious, like logical, lateral thinking conclusion. As a result, they become an objective as well. Where, yeah, that should be fine. I don't. But I do like the way that, I mean, again, I might change up some very slight verbiage, but I do like the way that this script has in just 3 lines, mind you, and one of them being very small, mostly a sign off. The Nidus Trinity get, I think, some pretty nice representation in terms, like pretty accurate representation, but it's got character to it. I don't know if the immediate opening line where he's like feeding off of the impending line or whatever. I might make this a little bit more simplified instead of trying to be a little bit more fancy. But you know, referring to them as blessed creatures, sacred beasts. I wanted to end his line with the identification of who he is and who his faction is. Because I wanted Athintos to immediately step in. Like he's not even gonna finish the last syllable of Trinity when Athintos steps in and is like, cease communications at once. Like basically making it obvious that like there's no that reaction in and of itself, even if you don't know what a Nidus Trinity is, you didn't read the fucking description or you know watch these streams and figure out like, oh, I wonder what that is. Like if you have never heard of the Nidus Trinity, then just that one line and the character's reaction to the Nidus Trinity being uttered should be enough to tell you exactly what you need to know about this faction and what they represent and the relations that they have with other races, other factions. So All right, I think that worked out pretty well. The one thing is, so there's a couple of lines where I want to tighten up or confirm that this is the direction I want to go to with Joran. The other thing, though, is that I definitely want to. Where is it? This line for Kiraxar. So I'm. Every single line has to do some work. It has to justify its existence and its inclusion. And obviously, I need to name whatever this is. But the line where he says, "How I wish it were not so that Terimanok chose this path. Must we battle his servants alone?" That line is there for two reasons. It's to establish that Kiraxar has some misgivings about this mission and the fact that, you know, maybe it's ideally it implies that there's history between the two characters, and then we get into that a little bit more when they confront each other in the and like banter sections, basically. But I wanted to set that up here, and the "must we battle his servants alone" sentence is obviously there to solidify the fact that this is a 1 versus 2 scenario, and then we segue into the discovery of the Terrans and their inclusion. By comparison, the setup of, like, obviously this paragraph here, this message from Athintos, is the translation between the Alasara Council and the orders that have come on, basically. And I might tighten this up to somehow maybe shorten it or something. But the point of this is to shed light on how the Divine Primacy handle orders, what their structure looks like, identifying that Kiraxar is the Justicar, identifying that they're part of something called a jury. And also identifying that Terimanok is a fugitive, a traitor, has consorted with Zerg, has followers, and that they have like obviously two different bases theoretically. So this line does a lot, even though it might feel a bit exposition-y. I think it'll be novel enough and doesn't really take that much time. So I don't think it'll be that big of a deal, because I think it's doing a couple of different things. It's also establishing, by the way, that Athintos is like a conduit for the like somebody who provides the will or relays the will from the council to commanders. So that is going to be somewhat intriguing, I think, to people who picked up on that. And I kind of reinforced that towards the end here, where Kiraxar makes a formal request to modify his objectives, his directives, and Athintos then has to do some communion of sort and then respond with a direct quote from the council again. So I'm kind of playing around with that and having multiple different cases of that so that we see that. And I think it's probably better to leave that to the briefing anyway. Like, for that to change in the middle of game, like, it's harder to know that, like, oh, the pause is it's more deliberate when there's nothing else going on, that something has paused. Like, so people have to fill that in, like, why was there a pause there? Without me just saying, oh, he was communicating to the council. So. I also, for a second, forgot that I actually did say Athintos' name in this. The reason why So this also feels a bit clunky that Athintos says both his rank and his name, but saying just his name feels too informal. Saying just his rank isn't really massively helpful, but I guess it could be. He does identify himself by name when he's talking to the Terran, so it kind of feels a little bit extra to throw that in here. So I'll just remove that and have him say Justicar. At least then it's reinforcing that he's the Justicar that was discussed in the transmission over here. Although he does call him Justicar earlier, but whatever. That at least then I'm not like doubling up on the name exposition. That's always an interesting challenge that I like to put myself into. Is how do I show you? How do I like name drop these characters within reason? Because if you think about it, if you're just one-on-one with somebody, there's not so many cases where you would actually say somebody's name. If it's just you'd be like, "Hey, dude," or "What's up, babe," or whatever the fuck. So you wouldn't just be like, hello, Mark. Well, I guess you would if you're fucking whoever that guy is, that Tommy Wiseau. Then you would say that. But you wouldn't be like, can you pass me this thing, Mark? Like if it's just two people, the context is you don't even have to say somebody's name or even an identifier because you're talking to the only other person in the room. So that does put me in an interesting position. And also for Protoss, like, there's no reason to say, like, summon this person and bring them to me, and then you would have to identify them because they could just communicate telepathically anyway. So, yeah, I think it's a neat challenge. I don't know that I always rise to the occasion and meet that challenge head on, but I try to. So I'll come up with, like, the... precedent of alliance of convenience. So I'll just throw that in here now because I obviously need to name that later. But yeah, I think overall this briefing's fine. Like obviously I need to update some lines. I guess since they talk about restoring honor to the Alasara, Kiraxar might be able to piggyback off of that line and talk about how he wants to, like it could be something like and what of your own honor, Monarch, what of mine, something like that might be. And then like we can have like a brief pause between these two, because then it's like, oh, there's some, I don't know, he's just like musing almost out loud or whatever. So maybe this works better than him saying, like, literally saying how I wish it were not so. That is appropriate in certain contexts, but here it feels like he's literally saying, my feelings are this. And that's obviously more telling than showing. Whereas these questions, they might be even a little bit more dramatic, but if you, like, the subtext of them implies wistfulness, feeling of potential regret, and also connection somehow between Kiraxar and Terramonok. So this is probably fine. And then maybe I can change this line or add something to it to make it a little bit more obvious that he's now addressing Athintos. So yeah, that feels a little bit better anyway. And maybe, again, I can find some other way to improve that. So yeah. We still have to do the in-game script, which will probably, paradoxically, even though it's going to be more text, will probably be easier because there's actually less... Like, the information that I'm going to be sending is... I'll have opportunity to add more subtext, to add more, like, hidden exposition in such a way where it's like... It's showing you the... I guess like exposition, in my mind anyway, can apply to, like, good exposition is when you have a line of dialogue that's like also showing you something about the character and showing you something about maybe where they come from or something like it's reinforcing more than just information that you need to communicate to the audience. And so I use it in a way that it's not always derogatory, but I will admit that most exposition is usually pretty bad. But I would like to embed exposition, embed vital information about the world and the factions that inhabit it. I'd like to embed that in dialogue that where that's not the only reason why the dialogue exists. It might not even be the primary reason, but if I can reinforce some things or introduce some things, depending on the case, I think that's better. So that's probably not a very controversial take, but it would be nice to have more stuff like that. All right. When I get back from my BRB, I will work on the script, as mentioned, and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, because the kinds of dialogue I'm about to write for the in-game transmissions are just a little bit more open-ended in that respect, it's probably going to work out. I think it'll be fun. So I shall return momentarily. BRB. We're standing up now. What's up? What's up? Me, obviously. Fucking gotcha there. It's too bad it takes YouTube 8 years to process a video. Oh yeah, that reminds me, I was supposed to replace that with a hydra disk. So as I assemble a sachet here, we're back on the emergency supply of G Fuel because it takes 8 years for the other one to actually ship, so. I sure hope this stuff isn't expired. I haven't had it in months. But yeah, dialogue for in-game. So a while ago, I talked with Mesk about finding ways to design dialogue so that it wouldn't be annoying, basically. And I feel like dialogue that doesn't serve a gameplay purpose probably shouldn't even be in the game to begin with, to be honest. But I also think there's a pretty good argument to I think there's a pretty good argument to be made for designing like a system that stores in bank data what you've seen and what you haven't seen in terms of dialogue, and then just doesn't play those dialogue lines. But the problem is we don't have an easy way to store that information, or to allow players to say, hey, I would actually like to experience it again from scratch without like removing other stuff, basically. So I guess there could be like a dialogue bank that you could delete, but that is still kind of like very much out of the way, you know what I mean? So. Because it's all well and good to say you just, it's the classic. What the fuck happened over here? Oh, I was supposed to do that. Wait, what? Was I? Just pranked myself, of course. This doesn't really matter, though, does it? I will make it matter. There you go. Anyway, I forget where I was going with that. I was gonna say, um, it's all well and good to say just make your dialogue not annoying, but anything is kind of annoying when you listen to it like 20 times in one day because you've had to restart the mission over and over again. So I don't know if it's possible to implement something smoothly like what I was talking about, but there'd probably be like in my Fantasyland imagination, you would boot up and in options there would be like a scenario options setting, and under that there'd be an option that says like you'd toggle it on or off, and it would say like play dialogue lines that you've already heard, or maybe it would be more like don't play the following dialogue lines if you've already heard them, and it would be like story based, which would be like intros that have no gameplay context, and then it would be like gameplay, like map specific ones. I don't know. Like you could isolate which ones you wanted to hear over and over again, and then next to that there would be an option that's like a button that you'd push, and the button would just be like, clear, banked data for this map or something. And I feel like that would probably work out fine. All right. Let me just quickly boot up the. So that's correct. All those are correct. It's kind of funny how I've revealed this stuff, but for some reason it's not correct at all over here. Why? Does it need to be maybe like one down or something? I'm really confused about that one. That's really weird. I have never exhaustively experimented with Fog of War. So I don't actually know all of the quirks. Like if I do this, what happens? Yeah, it looks like one tile down actually shows you more things. Like, but then I'm pretty sure that one tile to the left shows you too much or something. Well, it looks like only in some cases. I don't know why. Definitely doesn't feel very consistent. I'll say that much. Right. Well, I guess I'll just. do it this way, and we'll... Oh, fuck. Double famous. Oh, so it's like, I see what you're saying. Okay. I guess that makes sense. I wonder if it's too much to reveal. Additional resource areas. I guess I can reveal. Well, if I reveal that one, it feels like it's so out of the way that players would probably take it more often than not. But I guess because it's so out of the way, that's its own drawback. Because if you do decide to dedicate some defensive forces over there, they're really far as a rotation away from the action. So maybe I'll do it anyway and see what happens. There you go. All right. That's fine. I'll take that. Actually. All right, so the intro, I'm still like the reason why I talked about like getting jaded after hearing the same thing over and over again, getting annoyed as a player. Um, it does make me feel like maybe the intro shouldn't be there at all. But I do know, like most people are aware that hitting escape cancels a dialogue event, and I always trigger my maps so that skipping dialogue doesn't have knock-on effects, like it's gonna break something. So maybe it's fine to throw an intro in and just have people hit escape, should they decide to want to skip it, right? I think that probably does make sense the more I think about it. So ultimately, that's probably what I'll do is just have a short intro. It'll be good for the first time you go through it, and you can skip it if you don't want to listen to it. And maybe that's enough. I think if you could get I think honestly that would unlock a lot of potential because you could then have like obviously video editing. You could do any sort of like even the mundane shit of like cutting, fading, and doing all that other stuff would be really nice. So yeah, unironically, that's what we should do. That way, assuming we want something more complicated than whatever, but I don't have any planned in-game cutscenes for any of these maps anyway, so won't apply for here, but by the way, if you take this doodad and you rotate it, I'll just do it. I think removing the console, if you do it correctly, only has that effect if you um it only has that effect if you are at the very bottom of the map. So anyway, this is a crow beak if you rotate it. So now you can't unsee that. It's a crow beak, and he's got a feather covering his eyeballs. So it's protected. And I guess he's got a tumor on the bottom of his beak or something. I wish it wasn't such a chore to handle doodad sprites, because I would just make a bunch of like versions of this where they're jagged and like coming in at different angles and stuff. I can make them as doodads, but to have them be like to have units appear beneath them is the headache, unfortunately. Somebody said Corbo said that he removed the console and did some more work on it and made it so that their only artifacting was at the bottom of the map. But it could be that it's because his Corbo, he just didn't notice that there was obvious issues. So maybe I guess I'll take your word for it over his. That guy. What a man. Hopefully these are walkable. Yeah, they are. I suppose you could just crop out whatever's fucked in that way, but then you are left with something that doesn't match the aspect ratio. Especially that bottom left area definitely needs some love in the art department. I think the two dads in this tile, so it might be a bit fucked. Should probably get around to fixing those at some point. I wonder why they made the shadow only show up there. It doesn't even look like there is a shadow. That almost doesn't trigger me. Yes, I remember this. So I think I've figured it out. The rank of Ethintos is actuary. An actuary is somebody who does risk assessment. It's like accounting and stuff, but for insurance and whatnot. And in this context, it's actually pretty funny considering he's literally like, again, he's assessing the risk of this operation. I was trying to think about some way to throw in his rank in the briefing so it's not just in the intro. I guess just right here would be fine. Why are there two? I don't know what the fuck was going on there. What's up, Veeker? I think it's done processing. So after this stream, I will do timestamps and publish it. I'm not sure if you'll be able to actually watch it, given your current situation, but I guess you probably still have your phone and data and stuff. After watching back the whole thing, there were 3 cases where I wanted to make further edits. 2 of them were just cutting out some like incorrect stuff that basically where I referenced something that I didn't do, and I removed other references to it, but I didn't catch all of them. So I was able to remove those in YouTube's editor. The other one was just adding another image over because I described something from Parabola, and most of the time when I describe something from another map, I have a screenshot of that whatever I'm describing appear on screen, and I just forgot to do. I didn't catch it in this case, so that's the only thing actually that I wanted to edit that I didn't. So overall, besides the video maybe just being too long, it's pretty good. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it came out. What's up, Slash Escape? Is that some meme that I'm too out of touch with reality to recognize? You want to talk about Shakespeare? You see nothing yet, homie. I recommend finding a very obscure, unfinished Zerg campaign where queens and overlords talk in Shakespearean style writing. That's what I recommend. DF knows what I'm talking about, and he's probably the only other person who does. I was just getting the topics written out for the extended whatever they are. You know literally nothing about Starcraft? Well, I was wondering why you referenced Shakespeare's Hamlet, because unless it's a reflection of me writing long and stupid dialogue, which might be the case, but I don't believe so in this case. I do like that. I like that idea. Writing report. I would just say Ewing or something stupid. Well, you'll fit right in around these parts then. As far as what this is, I'm just writing dialogue for my mission. So I feel like this intro is probably a little bit on the longer side, but again, I'm operating under the assumption that players who have already heard it and don't wish to hear it again will just hit the escape key once to skip the intro. So yeah, hopefully that's what they do. Shakespeare Sunset. Yeah. Shakespeare Raven Shrub. Whatever the fucking. Oh shit. Can you believe it took so many years for somebody to fix the spelling of Tarask? Why Windows? Oh, 210. I wonder why Microsoft even wants to make another operating system. I wonder if it really is that much money. I mean, I guess maybe their operating systems might actually be loss leaders. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. What's up, roller skates? Welcome. Oh, did they say somewhere that Windows 10 was going to be the last OS or something? When you do that, I just throw the file into Photoshop and save it, crop it, save it as a whatever BMP, and then do the same. It doesn't take me any time, so unless it takes you more time to do that, in which case you should just send me it all individually. I don't really care. So if it's better for you, like whatever's simpler for you is fine because it's not really an inconvenience for me. Yeah, so in that case, just that's fine. Though I mean, I wouldn't care if you just dumped individual files as uploads onto in my DMs, but I guess it does clog it up, so I'm fine with whatever. Pretty agreeable. So I'll get the wireframe for that done by June Young later, and then I guess we'll be done. I mean, I still want to do the Anthelian sound effects. I'll probably dig through and see where Veek's implementation is and see what I can do for that. Because I already have them implemented, like added to the game. So. And then I guess it'll just be AI changes. Spinthelian, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think some of it must be in weapon damage for pulling the units in, but I don't even know if that needs. I guess a hit sound effect would be nice, but it's probably better to. No, I don't know. I'll just take a look at it later. I think it's probably better to only play one sound effect on the Anthelian itself if a weapon is hit. I mean, I could just go do this now, I guess. We have arrive, move, charge, and weapon fire. I don't even have a hit, so that's probably fine. Nice Visual Studio ammo. So this is where we would do a CBW print, or not print, what the fuck? Play sound from source. I don't remember if this is in SCBW anymore. It might be a helper. But I'm pretty sure play sound from source is somewhere. That's helper. Oh, it's 04. That actually should be everything, so. How did you end up over here?
Contact.
Probably should create an overlay or something. So it's playing the... Wait, where is it? It's playing the move charge even after it teleports? So I'm not sure what's up with that. That seems like maybe I have to do something more elaborate there. I'm glad he doesn't even get to turn around. He's just That's that also seems like something we should probably fix. So I need to spawn some sort of particle effect on the attacked unit. So we'll say I guess we could do neutron flare orange. Oh wait, it would be in sprites. So I guess I can just, if it's an image ID instead, I can just do this. Oh, do we have neutron flare orange? Let's just search neutron flare. Oh, this one doesn't do missile damage, okay. So it looks like it's... Oh no, that's not orange. Didn't I have a... What does this use? 589. Okay. Yeah, that would be pretty nice. Or I guess will be. You're right. Yeah, okay. So that's happening every tick somehow. So I guess we should do if target sprite get overlay. Oh, okay. Image. That really should be has overlay. I don't know why it's get overlay if it's... Whatever. GPTP. I'm guessing that's some error with the way that I've iScripted this. It should be like that. Probably needs to be a specific type as well, yeah. Let's try that. That one doesn't work either. Oh, maybe it has to be a... It shouldn't have to be a sprawl, because... if it's a sprawl instead, the difference is the... I guess it can be, but it's not. It's going to free. It won't follow the position of the sprite. So 1446. And then in GPTP, we have to do... I actually don't know what the function would be. I'm kind of confused as to how I would do a through GPTP do a sprawl. But apparently those are all of the sprite methods. I wonder what happens if I actually just data override the... And maybe I should just data override the thing. I don't know. Although then it's not doing missile damage, so that would cause fucking issues too. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how to do a sprawl instead of an imgal, but through GPTP. But just do this. I'll leave that disabled for now. Let's see. Empyrean weapon. Update AI. Oh, is there a helper sprawl? No. Classic. I guess it would have to be like a create thingy or something. Hmm. Well, I can define it as a thingy, or a flingy rather, but... Alright, I guess I can try that before going back to my script writing here. Although now the obviously this conditional doesn't actually do anything anymore. I'm wondering why sometimes it appears to appear above them, but not all the time. It is working now, but that is a weird visual bug. Alright, well. At least it works now. Fix. Angelion weapon hit. I won't push that to the dev build just yet, but nice. Okay. So later on, I have to do the Let's bring up the Trello real quick. So, let's say Anthelion. Oh, wait, this was Fortune 1. Anthelion. There you go. So I just have to do the Striga repulsion stuff later, and then I think we'll be good. All right, let's close this for now. Back to work on what we were originally attempting to do. I did see it in the commit history, but I have not actually opened it up and looked at it. Yeah, dude, you're getting psionic stormed. Underneath the Maverick, you mean? But yeah, I guess that probably does make sense. I guess we should probably hook that create thingy function and then have like an extra parameter that defaults to 0, where if it's set to 1, it would create it at an elevation level above the sprite. As the Maverick. I thought you were. Well, no, I forget that Restream has the fucking delay on filtering YouTube messages for some reason. I should actually be that fucking that guy where somebody would be like, "Dude, I saw this lurker attacking my mineral line." I was like, "Holy shit!" So I got some dragoons to fight. I'm just like, "La Kizzle disc." Oh, did it? What did you say? The only message I got from you was Spinthelion, and then that one. I mean, that was the previously most up-to-date message. So, unless Twitch banned you for some reason, I guess I can check my fucking manager. Manager. Oh, desperately trying to shoot to survive. Yeah. For some reason, maybe shoot to survive is like a white supremacist whistle, dog whistle or something. This dialogue exchange is a bit long for something in the middle of gameplay, but hopefully I can tighten it up later. I'm also not really sure how I'm going to embed the required exposition into any of these dialogue lines where it explains why Terim refers to himself as Terim and not Teriminok, because he's like dropped the last half of his name. Maybe I just don't even fucking bother trying to crowbar that in somewhere, but I'll keep watch for a reasonable section to maybe hint at that. I guess I'll hint at it with that, and that'll be it. It's fine. That'll do the trick. Did you happen to check out the mapping starter guide, Roller Skates? If you did, I'm curious as to your thought or thoughts. Yeah, you only have one thought, actually. Unintentional destruction of a man. I swear, I accidentally moved my spinthelion into his mineral line. They'll definitely include some nuggets of my thoughts on writing. I mean, before the like, you weren't here, Veek, but like the opening hour plus of the stream includes a lot of me talking about like what my objectives are for dialogue. Because I'm explaining stuff and engaging with chat, and it really does slow the overall progress. I'd probably be done with the whole script by now if I was doing this offline. Not that I'm saying I'm upset about that. It's just the way that it is with the stream, and I don't mind talking about this stuff, so it's pretty rewarding in that sense. But you missed the section where I was explaining all of my thoughts on that, because I went into some pretty fucking excruciating detail reviewing it and tweaking it and stuff like that. So. Yeah, it's kind of a long video. Well, part 2 is in the can. I have to timestamp it before I publicate it, but everything else is done with it, and it's slightly longer. So buckle up. I was just curious if you thought any of it was actually useful, because obviously, I'm assuming you've made maps for longer than the average Joe who might be watching it for the first time. So maybe you had some contrary opinions, or maybe you just felt like there was an obvious thing I missed that I could have talked about, or something like that. But I try to get everybody's opinion on that stuff, because it's one thing to say like, hey, you're interested in making maps but haven't made any or haven't made much, so what do you think of this video? And then like versus somebody who, like, I assume most of the people in this chat, for example, have already made a ton of maps, where what they take away from that video is going to be a bit different than the quote unquote beginner, the hypothetical layman. I should actually. One of the things that I'll definitely do ahead of the recording of the future, like the asymmetric scenario campaign style stuff that I'm going to be doing next for the mapping guide series, definitely need to write out a couple of bullet points for my intro and then run through those. That was what made the first video successful, and I felt like I did a pretty good job off the cuff in an intro that I recorded and then didn't use for the second video. But when I wrote down the bullet points, it was way more succinct without losing quality. So I'll just do that. But there's a ton of different topics that I could talk about. I think in the context of the third episode, we'll just talk about making a scenario that's kind of a one-off, similar to what this map is and similar to what plenty of other maps are. You're just going to get one-offs where, like, what we want to do is have enough intrigue and have enough of an interesting premise to pull people in. They experience it, and it's almost like we would almost conceptualize it more like a movie, actually, where it's beginning and end, and it's not a series. You know, if there's a sequel, it's another one-off. You know what I mean? Like it's not a campaign, right? It's not a TV series, if you want to use that example. So there's not really a clean thing that immediately carries over because movies are usually much longer than like playing a single mission is. But just for one of the many differences. But yeah, that would be like the cleanest like allegory there is, and we'll talk about like I'll definitely spend a lot of time focusing on things like trying to maximize the impact of individual elements and how you can use one-offs to explore storytelling devices in video games and explore like all sorts of stuff that you can't normally or you can explore those things in a campaign or a longer narrative, but you can't have the uh, you don't have the freedom to completely jump to something brand new and unrelated if you're making a linked story, obviously. So sort of like how I encourage people to do 1v1 maps before they do something bigger and melee maps before they do something more unorthodox. For writing, I definitely encourage people to play around with one-offs and completely unlinked stories and try to make a single map's experience compelling before they worry about writing a larger, longer narrative that is going to necessarily have more burden on execution because you obviously have to do like more planning and stuff. So, but yeah, I still haven't decided like what exactly I'm going to do because I think the third map or the third map in the third video will concern with obviously a one-off, but then does the fourth concern with a bigger one-off? Does it concern with maybe a cooperative scenario? There's a lot of different ways I could go. I could just do a bigger one-off. I could do like map one of a campaign. I could do cooperative, like Nemesis style scenario where it is bigger in general than the previous maps have been. But I'm thinking maybe I wait for any there's a mapping primer or whatever, a starter guide. There's also probably going to be a campaign primer, campaign starter guide series, where I walk people through the creation of an actual campaign, even if it's only like 5 missions or whatever. And I go through my whole process from start to finish. And I don't even know what that would look like because, like, would that just be one immense 10-hour video or something absurd? Or would it be like one episode per mission? Or would it be like the first episode is the planning and like going over the project construction from the ground up before we even get into a first level, and then from there on every video is about one of the maps, and then maybe there's a final video that wraps everything up? I don't know exactly what the format for that would be, but I feel like the format that I'm currently using for the mapping guide is actually really easily repurposed for a ton of other things. And in fact, I would probably want to make mapping guide style videos as developer diaries or developer series or whatever you would want to call them for campaigns and scenarios in general. So it would be really cool to do something like that for other scenarios. And I might just do a developer series for some of the one-offs that I do as like a dry run for that, and eventually we go into something more elaborate with the campaign thing. But the other thing is the maps that I've been making in this primer series are literally just made as tutorials. Like the premise of them being made in the first place, their reason to exist is so that I can educate people. Whereas a lot of the other stuff that I'm making is made to be, justify itself. It doesn't have that external justification. So I don't actually know what that would do to the overall construction of it. Because if you think about it, like for me, at least this is what I've observed. After the video is done, I have zero interest in revisiting the map and updating it. Like I'll still do it on occasion or to like fix some bugs, obviously, or whatever, something small, low hanging fruit. But doing like more elaborate terrain changes or a really heavy, like multi-hour long decoration pass or something, it's almost like out of the question. I'm like not interested whatsoever. So I almost viewed that as like a natural extent, like conclusion of the thing. It's like, oh, the video's done, and that was the reason why I made the map. Not like it's not like I made the map and I was like, oh, this would go great with a video. Like the whole point of the map is to facilitate the creation of a video. So I wonder if that wouldn't have an adverse effect on a campaign as well. Not sure how that would go exactly. Nidus is usable by hostile players. I do kind of like that as a premise. The problem is that, so this isn't really a problem, but it does blur the line a bit, where in that sense, like, would transports be usable by hostiles? Would bunkers be usable by hostiles? You can say no, and I would say probably not. Yeah, not a good idea. But bunkers not being usable by hostiles, like bunker and Nidus are both buildings. Transport and Nidus both rely on like that contextual order of loading. Like obviously internally it's a different order, but like the concept of like ordering your unit to move there and then it does something, it does an interaction. Especially the bunker connection feels like if you're going to make it for Niduses, then you should probably make it for bunkers too. Otherwise, it's a gimmick. And logically, if you were going to make this change for anything, you would probably do it for bunkers first. If you're basing it on logic, because what is stopping my unit from entering a bunker? You know what I mean? Like it's just because it's a hostile bunker. Like, oh, I don't have the access codes. Ah, shit, guys, access code denied. So, like, whereas the Nidus Canal might like close up or something when you walk up to it, and then like, okay, well, the only way it is to destroy it. Like that makes a bit more sense, but obviously like you can hand wave away whatever. I feel like the problem with that change is that it doesn't exist in it doesn't work. It works in a vacuum, but it feels gimmicky when you take it in the context of everything else. Well, it has a pilot or AI, but what's stopping a unit from walking into a transport? Like again, you can make up as an excuse, but you have to start making up those excuses. Whereas now you don't have to currently, but if you made a change that changed the interaction between a hostile unit and a utility unit / structure and a unit that's hostile to that utility unit / structure, suddenly you have to start justifying why it doesn't work in certain selective cases. And just being in that headspace makes me feel like it's a gimmick. So I would want to go all or nothing whole hog. And I like the idea. I think it's actually really cool to imagine like, oh yeah, run in. And then yeah, the bunker idea of like, oh yeah, if there's units in it, I can't enter it. But if there are no units in it, or if there are only allied units in it, then I can enter it. I like the idea of essentially having players construct utility structures or use utility elements that don't necessarily only affect them or aren't only usable by them. Because if you think about it, in a more boring RTS game, you would have these neutral elements that can be used by anybody, but they would be pre-placed. They're probably immortal. You probably can't even target them. And their only interaction that you can have is using them. But in our case, if we went this route, suddenly you have these things that you can build, you can destroy, you can use, no matter who built them. and you can pre-place them as a map designer for a neutral player, but you can also just make use of them in general. So I do like that idea. It will be a little bit clunky with attack move, but I don't think that that's necessarily a huge issue. It's just not something I'm interested in exploring right now. I think we could probably do like a branch of the development of maybe the specialist pre-release repo or something where it's like transport experiments or something. I don't know, whatever it would be called. And we would do some test games to see if it was good. But that would be a mechanic we would actually want to test, because as interesting as it is, I'm not even sure how it will work. If AI will be able to make use of it all the same, if like it would be weird in that sense. I think it's fine to ignore transports for this, but bunkers and niduses should definitely be affected by the same change. If we're going to change one, we should change the other. And I think that's fine. It is kind of interesting, though. Like, I don't know if it would be completely epic. Yeah, it's kind of how Terran add-ons work. That's a good point. I think if we were going to make this change, I would definitely want to couple it with AI that actually use bunkers correctly, intelligently. And we would need to have AI be able to garrison bunkers in the middle of combat if they were nearby. So that they didn't just, like, only use them as defenders or whatever the fuck. I guess they only use them if they're guards, because if they get converted to defense, they just unload, so whatever. Yeah, structures and units are different, is what I'm saying. Like, I'm just saying the excuse there for transports is like, all right, they're in the air, they would have to, like, they would literally have to, participate in the interaction because they're mobile units. Whereas structure doesn't really get a say in the matter. It's just there to be used as a tool. So I think that's a fine delineation. But yeah, like, I don't think there's a proper delineation between bunker and nidus, is what I was mostly getting at there. Which nobody was making the argument that there was a delineation. I was just saying it in general. Oh shit, we got Heltrix's map crap submission. Crap me 25th. That's a fucking zip, if I've seen one. Your crap map has some neutral structures. Well, I still have to write my fucking script, dude. I thought for sure I would get into the triggering phase today, but that doesn't seem very likely at this point. Although I will say, I did knock off some things off my to-do list for the Cosmonarchy update, and obviously with the mapping tutorial done, I don't have to edit that. So off stream, I can finish the script and probably do the triggering that I need to do. It's just going to be... I'm going to have to spend a bit more time on it than I initially thought. But... It's a little bit cliche to have like the swarm feasting or like talking about the Zerg eating or whatever. But unless I think of something more compelling and less cliche, I'm going to leave with this, because I do think that a lot of the character that's going to be at play with the the Nidus Trinity guys is going to be in the voice acting. It's going to be in the delivery, where they play it completely straight and take it super seriously, but it's almost like reveling in, this is going to sound actually really cliche, but it's almost like reveling in being evil. Like, think of like the Emperor in the prequels of Star Wars, where he's just like, ha 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 ha. It's like kind of like that, but even though that seems very cliche on its face, I understand people's skepticism when I bring this kind of thing up. I still think it's actually got some flair to it, just because it's like unabashed. It's not beating around the bush. It's not like trying to be more complex than it is. Like, I don't think that these guys are evil, and I don't think these guys think they're evil, but they're kind of carrying themselves like with like completely like extreme devotion to their fucking religious beliefs or whatever the case may be, that sort of thing. So I think it's good. I think it'll work. Yeah, sure. Or if you can't upload it because of your current issue. That's fine. It's fully functional now, or were you planning on making more changes and can't yet, or couldn't yet? Okay, gotcha. Well, I've been making AI changes anyway, so we'll have to wait and see. I didn't make any changes to build orders, but I did improve the handling of static defense, so I don't know how much that will uh, change stuff. I know you were talking about AI usage. I guess you're talking about like Niduses or whatever. But all right, how is that working, by the way? Did you actually finalize AI usage of Nidus canals? Like, does it work? There's a term for sacred cows and like sacred animals and stuff, but I forget what the fuck it is. We'll just call them saviors for now. That's really funny to say about Zerg. That'll be a nice little dramatic flair. Right, yeah, of course. Hopefully he returns sometime soon, dude. He's gone on a quest to see how many a Cantor requests he can mem patch into the fucking AI, apparently. And while that is a useful thing to do, I won't argue with the results, but come on, dude. All right, we got a couple of dialogue lines. We still got plenty more to do. Totem is a good word. All right, let's take a look at this. This U. Ah, shit. I see you've done containment over here. So, I'm looking at Veek's Unholy Grail map. This is a sneak peek of his Mapcraft map, so I'm kind of spoiling the experience for myself, I guess. But I'll just I assume this is these are like the cases where you were talking about where some expansions seem to have neutral bunkers near them, and then you got some containment for the creep over here. The one thing I would say about the creep colony is this does favor Zerg because you can obviously build here as Zerg. I guess the creep colony could be destroyed unless it's... Oh, it's invincible. Okay, never mind. So that answers the other question, is that these are invincible. Obviously, the bunkers wouldn't be. So I would suggest making entirely unbuildable terrain and placing the Nidus there, or like then it doesn't generate creep below it, or just deal with the fact that it only generates a little bit of creep. The reason being, only Zerg can garrison this area and just start, like, obviously you could put defenses around it, but then it's like eating up more build space in this area. But obviously this doesn't stop you from just spamming sunken colonies here or whatever if you wanted to hold it off, basically. However, if your intention was to design a home field advantage for the Zerg, then that would actually be fine. I don't have a problem with that. It's just I don't know exactly what you were aiming for. It looks like the only Niduses on the map are these, judging by the lack of line. Oh, never mind. There's some here. Ah, you got some networks over here as well. That's an interesting concept for sure. I like the. I definitely like the idea, and it does provide a little bit more utility to coming into this area. Which, when I was looking over the layout in the past, an earlier iteration, we did both come to the conclusion that these long corridors didn't really serve. They didn't serve much of a purpose to path down, but now that you have the Niduses, there's another reason to go there. They almost act as pathways unto themselves because they create new pathways for the army. Yeah, I suppose the proxy idea is pretty neat as well. Definitely, I had not considered that because obviously you can do this in an enemy's base as well and start putting down like larval colonies, static defense to lock it down or whatever. You can lock down both sides, and then the other races can still lock down sides over here. So yeah, that's I hadn't considered the proxy angle. That is pretty interesting. I won't take a much closer look because I obviously want to keep some of the surprise of how it plays out and the layouts and stuff for myself for when I play it tomorrow. But it is a really interesting idea, and I really like the experimentation. Yeah, other races can defend it by building outside of it. Yeah, that's a nice idea to do the containment thing. So obviously the central Niduses don't have the same rule. They're more because there's more creep in that area. That might be a place where you want to remove the creep colony. I'm not sure, but unless again you want to allow only Zerg to build there, because right now we don't have buildable creep for neutral or allied players, which will be a nice flourish there, I think. That'll be a nice change, is what I'll say. Forgot to update the date here. So we'll say, oh no, that does say begins, so. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Looking forward to fucking around with that. I guarantee you that some sort of neutral structures that can be interacted with will become staples of melee maps. Maybe not in every single case, but definitely something that is interesting because it'll open up just different possibilities. I still do believe, by the way, that having teleporters through like triggers and stuff in installation missions, for example, is so boring and so bad for level design. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to make good level design using them as an element. It just means that you shouldn't use it as like, this is a dead end. Well, I guess I'll throw a teleporter here. Which was always my main criticism of that in the context of the installation mission. So I think it's actually really interesting to play around with the player's expectations that way. So there you go. That's my review of the concept. Anyway, I have a mapping guide to do timestamps for and then publicate. So that'll come out in probably 15 minutes or so. And or less maybe. I have to use the bathroom first. And I will just say before I sign off, a totem does equal Tikimon. Tikimon. Tikimon signing off. Thank you for frog emoji.